Hello and welcome to another episode. Today we're going to be discussing the best techniques for hollowing your 3D prints and how to put the drain holes where they should be and how to orient them the best way essentially to make your hollowing actually worthwhile. See, some people start their hollowing journey and they just simply hollow the print. They don't really fully understand the whole consequences of putting drain holes in a bad place or maybe not even putting drain holes at all. Trust me, I've seen everything. But you definitely want to make sure that the print is oriented the way it should be. Align the plane that you're going to be putting the drain holes in properly so the drain holes start with the print so that way you're not printing this huge suction cup the entire time that you're printing. Anyway, without further ado, we're going to get right into it today. I'm going to show you guys the best way to put this stuff together. Here we go. Okay, and the first thing I'm going to show you is essentially the base part, which is a most common thing that most people will hollow because it's usually a giant hockey puck, and especially for these big figurines. So this is usually the most common thing that people will hollow. This one's actually a little awkward because it's not entirely flush on the bottom. It's got this little lip on the edge where these little stones are supposed to be sitting. And in case anyone didn't notice, this is, yes, the same base from the thumbnail. This is Chell from El Dorado, or Road El Dorado. It's a cartoon character. And this was Digital Dark, I think, released in April. Really cool figurine. You should definitely check out their Patreon if you're not a member already. I highly recommend it. They've got awesome models coming out every single month and really great quality. And I do all the pre-support work, so you know they work. So what are you waiting for? Go sign up. Anyway, so we're going to look at the hollowing aspect of this. So some folks would probably tell me the hollowing a base is a bad idea because of the fact that you want it to be one of the heaviest objects on the model. While I agree with you, there are ways of doing that after you're done, like filling it with sand and then covering this piece with a piece of plah, sanding that smooth, perhaps filling it with other material, etc. It doesn't need to be a solid chunk of resin. In fact, if you were to look at this as a solid chunk of resin, this is very heavy. It's 162 milliliters worth of resin right there. No supports. And it's going to need supports because this whole section of lip is an island. So you're not doing this without some supports in there. And I really fail to see how you're going to make tiny little supports work all along the bottom. I mean, I suppose you could do this in FDM. And just do the rest of your parts in resin if you were being clever about it. But then you're still going to have to sand away all those layer lines from the FDM printing, which I absolutely hate. So we're talking about hollowing, though. So in that case, what you're going to want to do is go over to your Prepare tab in Lychee Slicer and go down to the hollowing module. Then over here, you're going to get 4 options: holes, hollowing 3D, hollowing 2D, and blockers. We're mostly today going to be working with hollowing 3D holes and blockers, but mostly just holes and hollowing 3D. Commonly, I use, my preset is 1.7 millimeter thickness on the wall and a 4.0 quality. Now, the quality level has to do with the interior of the object. The higher the quality level, the smoother the interior is as it tries to essentially match what's going on the outside, but inverted. If you were to, say, lower this down to 1 and then look at the inside, you'll notice it's a lot more jagged. There's tons more edges in here, which honestly will probably just create more islands and ledges for you. So that's not why this is why I keep the quality higher, because I found that I have better luck with it. So I set mine to 1.7 and 4.0. Now, occasionally I'll go up to like a 2, 2.5. On this particular base, I actually did 2. So that's a 2 millimeter wall. And then what we did here was, because it's a 2 millimeter wall, it encompassed almost all of this edge. So if you want to relieve the suction on the edges of your print here, because this is going to cause suction, you probably need to make it just a teeny weeny bit thinner. As you'll see, that gives you a little bit more space to work with to put your holes. And now as we start to lay the drain holes down, you want to make sure that the drain holes are going to start with the print to ensure that you have the least amount of suction for the entire time. So the one thing we're going to want to do is make sure we put holes where the keys are and make sure we put holes lining up here so that way these don't create unnecessary suction where the keys are. That's the first thing. Then after we do that, we're going to move on to actually creating the bigger hole that's going to be on the bottom, as well as some smaller holes that are going to appear on this little lip area here where this brick face is. So the first thing I'm going to do here is just put a couple holes here along this edge and this edge. And then I'm going to take a look inside because obviously I'm cutting a little too close to the edge. And we'll just move these holes out a little bit. Okay. And then once you have your holes in a good position there for your starting point, which this should be enough, then we're going to create our big hole in the middle, which is going to cut most of the material out of the bottom. The reason I do this is because I found that creating small holes in the middle sometimes will lend to the base itself warping. Regardless of thickness. I mean, I've done up to 3 millimeters and it still warps. So I've started doing it this way because it gives it a really hard edge here where this very thin amount of material is left here, but it joins immediately up with the side. So it's very thick, it's very hard, and it works really well for keeping the bottom nice and solid, and it prevents it from warping. So once you get your holes in there and you're ready to pop them out, or if you want to leave them that way, you can, because Lychee does allow you to work with a virtual hole system using just, these little gray circles that it places. Now, personally, I don't like to leave them like that. I prefer going in and selecting the holes and then going over here to my holes conversion, which essentially will either pop caps out, which is the holes themselves create little caps that you can then use. You can print those and then you can pop them in and glue them in place, and that will help you seal your holes if you want. But I don't really care about that because none of these holes are going to be in a location that I care about. So I'm not going to do cap and hole. I'm not going to do cap only, and I'm just going to do hole only. So once you click that, it's going to modify this geometry and create a hollow object. There you go. This is essentially what the object is going to look like. Now from here, you can go ahead and place your supports. You can do your preview. You can, however you want to do it. You can auto support it if you want to. I mean, I don't recommend auto supporting things like bases just because they need more of a perimeter, and auto supporting doesn't usually do the perimeter unless you go with really ultra high auto supporting, and then you're just overdoing it with the supports. But now let's look at how much resin we saved by hollowing this object. Just to show y'all, is it worth it or not? 37 milliliters. Now that was down from 160, folks. So we went from 160 to 37. Now I know what you're saying. We haven't added any supports, and I'm sure the supports can equal up to 30 to 60 milliliters on their own, depending on how much supporting and bracings you're putting in there. Sometimes the supporting can be heavier than the object. In this particular case, I believe the entire print itself was about, I want to say 60 to 70 milliliters. So we practically saved 100 milliliters here just by hollowing this object. So there is it worth it? Yes. If it's done properly, it is absolutely worth it. Now, there are some objects you don't want to hollow. There's things like arms. They're too small, too thin. If you were to hollow them, it wouldn't really be enough material to work with for holes. I mean, look at that. Where are you going to put your holes? I mean, you have no room. They're going to invade into the key. It's not going to work. So I don't hollow arms personally. They're too thin. I just don't think it's necessary. I also don't hollow things like heads. And the reason being for that is because of the hair. All of this hair down here would become a huge issue because here, look, I've already hollowed this. You can see this is all hollow. So this becomes a problem because then we'd have to come in here to our blockers and we'd have to block out this entire section of hair. Now, if you're not familiar with how to use the blockers, essentially you're going to go over all the way to this blocker item, click the object you want to block, and then you add blockers. Now, what a blocker is, essentially it's a primitive polygon or object made of polygons, circles, squares, whatever, that is meant to block parts of the print from being hollowed. Um, and for obvious reasons, like I just pointed out, you might want to do this. Um, you'll see that here when I'm done with this, you'll see what I mean. Because essentially, that hair section was all hollow, right? So now, if we start to block it, you see the areas I put those primitives on, they're no longer hollow. And then right here where this stops, the hollowing starts again, blah, blah. Now, I wouldn't do this anyway because this is just a massive waste of time. And again, just like the arms, the keys don't have a lot of room for you to add holes. So there's not a lot of room here for this type of activity. So hollowing a head is just, it's just going to frustrate you. Don't do it. Just don't hollow heads. In fact, we're just going to take that hollowing out. See, it's so much better that way. And the other thing is a head on a model this size is usually about the size of a miniature in most cases. So you don't really need to worry about hollowing too much. They're small. They're going to make it. It's not going to be that big of a deal. Now, lower bodies, those sorts of parts, definitely want to consider hollowing that because they're pretty decently sized, chunks. So again, you'd want to go over to your hollowing, either choose your preset or plug in the information, do your hollow, and you'll see how much less space. I mean, look at this. All it's going to print is this outline, and then whatever supports you have in there. So you are going to save material, tons of material. I mean, this is going to be half, if not a third, of what it would be without the hollowing. And again, you're going to want to place your holes in the best place possible when the print starts. So, I mean, you can check this by using the suction cup detector, and it'll tell you, where those areas are. And you can then go back and go, okay, I need to place my holes. So in this particular torso, for example, there's not a lot of room to work with. But what we can do is we can insert holes into the side bottoms of the keys like this. And you'll see this will alleviate the suction. Because all you need to do is punch a hole in the object in order to alleviate the pressure. So let's go ahead and turn that back on, and then we'll go ahead and just do a search on this object, and I'll show you what I mean. See? So we've lessened the suction a lot. It's not gone completely, and there's still some areas that I didn't hit. So let's put 2 more holes there, and then we'll go ahead and put some holes here. And there probably needs to be one in this other arm socket as well. And unfortunately, where the chest area is, there's a little bit of a suction, but we're not going to put a hole there. It's just that's what I call negligible suction because it's very small. Let's go ahead and let's do the search again on that. And you'll see with each hole I add, we're slowly negating most of the suctioning issues. Apart from like a little bit of the body there. And this part down here in the front is kind of, it's not exactly going to be perfect because of the fact that there's this little area right here that's getting stuck between the belly button and the key. What you could do is you could actually make the wall thickness a little bit thicker, which might alleviate this. Or you could make it a tiny bit thinner, down to 1.5 if you needed to, and it might give you a little bit more room to work with. But you could alternately just put a very small drain hole there right in the front, and that will alleviate most of that suction. And now we only have these 2 little spots here. It does say there's 12, which there might be some more areas throughout the print that are getting suctioning. Or it could also be talking about this print as well. But You're still going to find points in the print that are going to suction. I found it near impossible to remove almost all the suctioning, depending on what the print looks like or the orientation of the way arms and things are facing. But you'll see with each hole I create, it definitely relieves a lot of that suctioning issue, and will eventually leave you with a print that has very little vacuum or suction going on. Now, obviously, the lower body here has issues because of the fact that I haven't put any holes into it. But let's go ahead and do that, and I can show you guys. Bigger hole there. And we'll put some holes in the flat area of the body there. And we'll go ahead and punch some holes in the keys. And then here in the leg socket, we'll put a key and we'll put a hole there. And then we'll put another hole there. And then we'll go ahead and run the suction cup detection again, which should show me that there's very little suctioning happening now. There's still going to be some. Okay, so the biggest part of suction is actually in here. You can see this line. This is in between the character's legs, which is that makes sense because there's no flow in between these skirt pieces and and in between her thighs. So essentially, there's a suctioning issue there, but there's literally nothing you can do to relieve that except for turning the print upside down. And I don't recommend it with these types of prints because of the fact that there's this skirt here. I actually like to make those face up, not down, because it's better to have it supported from this direction than have all this skirt be hanging down, and then you wind up having the supports here and the support there, and then you have this staggered support that's just kind of a pain. This is also one of those things that would definitely need a blocker. You would definitely want to block off the portion of this skirt here that is creating that suction. But you want to be careful as to not block off any of the areas that you want to hollow, like, for example, the leg. So, as we scroll up here, we can see that bit's hollow, and we can see that the hollowing circle here will slowly kind of, eliminate that hollowed area in the skirt. But again, this is going to take you a little bit of finagling, kind of moving the little sphere around to get it exactly where you want and make sure that you're blocking the places that you need to block. Now, the reason that blocking is so important is because of the fact that if you don't block these areas, they will just become holes, and they become what's called a resin trap, because this doesn't have any flow in and out, and it's going to get cured in there. So you're essentially going to have liquid inside your cured resin forever, which is not a good thing, because eventually it's going to eat its way through, and you're going to wind up having a breach or a weep in your resin later, which is what some folks complain about and say that the reason they don't do hollowing is because they don't like the whole weeping thing. Now, there are a couple solutions to prevent your model from weeping. You can drill a hole in there to release the fluid. Or obviously you can follow best practices for hollowing, removing those areas and making sure that they're blocked. The other types of body parts that I will often hollow will be things like legs. This particular leg or legs are not as thick as some, but they're thick enough that you can hollow these. And the orientation, I have them here where you're looking at essentially the above the knee, or usually sometimes the thigh, with the foot facing up or down rather, towards the vat. The reason I do it this way is because you wind up with a much smoother print orientation this way, where you have this large flat plane rather than having to focus on either the foot or the key, as not every foot is going to be flat. Sometimes you're going to wind up with this kind of arched feet kind of design. So it really just depends on how the feet are oriented. But if you're going to hollow a leg, just like pretty much anything else, just make sure that you hollow it to the size and, specifications that you want, and then make sure that you put the drain holes where they're going to be needed. Now, in this particular case, the keys themselves are pretty wide, so you can usually put like a hole or two at the bottom of the key, and then as you move up, usually placing them in other areas that they will need to be to prevent suctioning. So if we look at this leg, for example, there's not a whole lot of space at the above the knee area. But what you can do in this case is you can punch your holes here in your key, and this will create a nice aerated drain area at the bottom. And even if you can't put drain holes here on this surface because you don't have enough room, this will create enough relief for draining that you won't need to worry about it too much. And yes, if we did a drain hole search, it's going to show you, or sorry, suction search, it's going to show you that there is definitely suction in those areas. And I mean, there you go. But that, according to the way I've been doing these leg parts like this, if they turn out like this, it's a pretty good bet that this is going to work the best way. And like I said, I'll just put the holes in the key, and then I'll put a hole in the top of the key. Now, the reason I put holes in the foot area as well as the bottom is because this allows for aeration once you're going to clean it and post process it. Cleaning whatever. This allows the alcohol to flow through the part rather than just trying to flood into one end, and you wind up with vacuuming issues anyway. So that is pretty much how I would hollow out those various parts. And again, if we're talking about value of worth, and we want to check this out, I mean, resin volume on one leg, 23.62. Oh, wait, it's actually showing me both. Hang on. So both legs are 23. Let me see. What's the one leg? 16.41 for one leg solid. Okay. Now this is the hollow one. 7 milliliters. So are you saving resin? Yeah. Now, again, you're probably going to argue with me that the supports are going to use up that much resin anyway. Sure, that might be the case. I might use another 7 to 10 milliliters making my supports. However, what's going to use more? Starting at 16 or starting at 7? So you're still saving resin regardless. And generally, that's what hollowing is usually used for, is either to save material or to lessen the pull on the build plate. Because heavy prints will pull harder. Hollow prints will pull really hard if you don't hollow them properly. But for the most part, if you do it right, your hollow prints are going to come out better. They're going to use less material. And they're going to be even easier to support because you're not going to have to use these massively huge supports because the parts are going to be lighter. So it's going to go easier on your printer, less materials, and less supporting. I mean, honestly, it's a win-win-win. Oh, and it's going to save you money. So, I mean, there's that. Personally, it's a win-win-win for me, and hollowing is usually a no-brainer. If I have big parts like a base like this, I hollow it. Heads, arms, no. Tiny things like guns, accessories, definitely not. If it's not even a millimeter thick, there's no point, because thinning it beyond that point literally makes it paper thin, and then the object just becomes too fragile. So best bet is things like bodies, upper body, lower body, legs, bases, big objects like terrain, rocks, mountains, um, pillars, things like that are just, it makes sense to, because obviously it's just a big hunking object otherwise. So in the cases of hollowing and that stuff, yeah, definitely. But if you're looking for, a way to do it and get it done better, definitely some of the orientation and some of the stuff I showed you here in this episode should definitely help you get a leg up in your hollowing game. If you were confused by it completely, hopefully this showed you a bit more on how it works, how blockers work, all that fun stuff. And I wish you the best of luck on your 3D printing journey as always, and I appreciate all the new subs and followers that we've had to the channel. We're really happy to welcome you all, and we're really glad you're here. We have a lot more content planned for the second half of the year, and as the channel grows and things are continuing to move up, we're working on a bunch of things. We have an episode planned where we're going to talk about the best 3D printer there is, or maybe, I don't know. We this is opinion-based stuff, so again, it's all based on results. We also have a cool new item from Fun Creek Coal called this light curing putty, which we're working on a review video for that. And I've got a bunch new stuff coming down the tunnel as far as other content for the channel. Anyway, hope you all enjoyed this one. Hope it was educational and enlightening as always. And we appreciate you. And we'll see you very, very soon. Take care now. Bye bye.